The man had a gun pointed at my wife's face, hands trembling, eyes bulging with self-importance, right there in our front yard. All because she jogged past the HOA clubhouse without identification. What he didn't know, and what I would have paid money to see dawn on his face, was that the woman he just tried to threaten with a knockoff Glock was an active Delta Force operative who just returned from a classified mission 2 days ago. Leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have another incredible story, and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts. She hadn't even unpacked her field gear yet, and now she was standing in front of a wannabe rental cop holding a weapon sideways like he learned it from a bad action movie. I knew she could have disarmed him with a pine cone and a zip tie, but for once she actually gave the guy a chance to surrender. He didn't take it. That's where things got real fast. We moved into this neighborhood to avoid noise. Ironic, really, considering my wife once diffused explosives in a thunderstorm during a hostage rescue. But she wanted quiet, something normal. She wanted to jog in peace, tend the garden, maybe start a chicken coop. And I, cybersecurity nerd, extremely indoorsy, just wanted a basement with good fiber internet. We found this HOA neighborhood tucked outside the city, marketed as a private, secure, family secretary community. They had glossy brochures and words like sanctuary, community spirit, and optional monthly events. Nowhere did it mention armed cosplay enthusiasts patrolling the sidewalks like it was a Call of Duty map. We should have known something was off when we saw the golf carts, 4 of them lined up outside the clubhouse. Each one painted matte black with white block letters. HSD, the Home Safety Division. Looked like budget SWAT units, if SWAT units had cup holders and garden gnome decals. One of them even had flashing blue lights zip-tied to the roof. I thought it was cute. Thought maybe it was for HOA parties or Halloween. Nope. These people took it seriously, as in try to give you a ticket for walking your dog without a leash on your own property. Serious. We kept to ourselves for the first week. My wife, fresh off her deployment, spent most of her time organizing the garage and setting up perimeter cameras. Habit, not paranoia. She always said it helped her transition. I spent my time in my home office, eyes glued to code, trying not to think about Karen Brewster, the HLA president, who introduced herself with a laminated badge and 3 clipboards. She had the smile of someone who had never been challenged and didn't plan to start now. She told us she was available 24/7 for community needs, and then handed us a printed booklet of rules. I flipped it open and found gems like no drying laundry outdoors, grass may not exceed 2.75 inches, and my personal favorite, residents must not appear intimidating during recreational activity. When I asked what that meant, she smiled and said, "You know it when you see it." That's when I knew we were in trouble. But my wife? She smiled politely, nodded, and thanked Karen for the welcome packet like she didn't just return from extracting foreign nationals under enemy fire. She's good at that, being calm, blending in. I've seen her walk into rooms full of tension and diffuse them with a single sentence. That's why what happened on day 8 floored me. It started like any other day. She got up early, pulled on her hoodie, tied her shoes, and went out for a jog. Just a quick loop around the neighborhood, she said. I made coffee and settled into my desk. About 10 minutes in, I got a motion alert from our street-facing camera. At first I thought it was a delivery, but when I checked the feed, I saw 2 of the HSD golf carts parked diagonally across the street, and my wife standing there completely still, hands slightly raised. In front of her was a man, maybe 50, potbelly barely contained, in a tactical vest, holding a pistol at chest level and shouting something I couldn't make out. I dropped my mug. By the time I sprinted outside, things had escalated. 2 more officers had shown up, standing behind the first guy like backup dancers, each one looking more confused than the last. And there she was, calm as ever, breathing slow, gaze locked on the gun. I stepped closer, ready to yell, but then I saw her right hand twitch. Barely, just enough for me to know she was ready to take control if she had to. The guy was yelling about identification, about how she looked suspicious, about how she was running in the restricted HOA zone without a badge. I remember thinking, who the hell runs with a badge? My wife kept her voice low, steady, asking if he was law enforcement. He said, We're HOA police. That's higher than city cops. Here. That was the moment I saw the tiny smirk tug at the corner of her mouth. She gave him one last chance. Sir, I'm going to ask you to lower your weapon for your own safety. He didn't. What happened next was so fast I couldn't even react. One blink and the man's gun was on the ground. Next blink and he was face first on the pavement. One arm pinned in a hold so precise it probably had a NATO name. She wasn't even breathing hard. She leaned in close and whispered something to him. I couldn't hear it, but whatever it was made his eyes go wide like he'd seen a ghost. Police were called, of course. 2 cruisers rolled in within 5 minutes. The fake cops started yelling about assault, about resisting HOA authority, about neighborhood safety. Then one of the real officers looked at my wife, paused and nodded. He asked for ID, she showed him something. He read it, looked up at the HOA goons and said, "Ma'am, you're good to go." And just like that, they left. No questions, no warnings, nothing. The look on Karen Brewster's face when she arrived 10 minutes later and found her captain nursing a dislocated ego and a bruised reputation was something I'll treasure forever. That was the beginning, because instead of backing off, Karen declared war, not just on my wife, but on us both. She had no idea she was picking a fight with someone who could sneak into a war zone undetected. Someone who didn't just play soldier on weekends, but trained them. Karen thought she ran this neighborhood. My wife, she's taken entire villages back from enemy control. And this neighborhood, this wasn't even going to be the hardest thing she faced that month. The emergency HOA meeting was called for 7:00 p.m. and by 6:30 you'd have thought it was the suburban Super Bowl. Lawn chairs lined the sidewalk, people brought popcorn, one guy even wheeled in a cooler like he was tailgating a playoff. Inside the clubhouse, Karen Brewster, self-appointed queen of the cul-de-sac, pinned a smile to her face like a badge and strutted up to the podium in a khaki vest overloaded with HOA pins and self-importance. Behind her was a whiteboard labeled Emergency Response Strategy. Stick figures had been drawn, one labeled Threat Actor, the other Heroic Defense. The Heroic Defense was wearing sunglasses and cartoonishly large biceps, obviously modeled after the disarmed HOA officer, Captain Fredrickson, whose actual physique was more pudding than powerhouse. Karen adjusted her microphone 3 times like she was about to address the United Nations. Then, in the most over-dramatized tone this side of a reality show, she began, "Neighbors, it is with a heavy heart that I report a direct and violent assault on one of our peacekeepers." Yes, peacekeepers. Not volunteers, not community patrol, peacekeepers, like we were living in a post-apocalyptic bunker. She pointed dramatically to the stage where Captain Fredrickson sat nursing his ego and his arm in a sling, wearing an expression that fell somewhere between embarrassment and lactose intolerance. Captain Fredrickson, Karen said with mock solemnity, was injured in the line of duty, protecting our streets from a hostile intruder with a known history of aggression. My hand shot up immediately. "Yes," she said, like she regretted calling on me before I even spoke. "Quick question. What's the known history? Because I live with her and she's never even raised her voice to a neighbor. She does, however, raise chickens. So unless that rooster's been throwing hands, I'm curious where that history is stored." A few people chuckled. Karen didn't. "Mr. Owens, we ask that you refrain from sarcastic commentary." "Got it," I nodded. "Just real commentary from now on? Like the part where your officer pulled a gun on my wife for jogging?" Karen twitched, but tried to recover. "It was a miscommunication. We had reason to believe the individual was casing homes for potential theft. She was wearing a Fitbit and listening to a true crime podcast." "Exactly," Karen snapped as though she'd cracked the case wide open. "She was listening to crime. That suggests intent." There was a beat of pure silence, then murmurs, then outright laughter. Even a few of the clipboard crew shifted uncomfortably. But Karen wasn't done, because what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that one of her cosplay commandos had bought a body cam off Amazon, hoping to feel more official, and what he forgot was that the footage automatically synced to the cloud. One of the neighborhood teens, bless his hoodie-wearing, TikTok-watching soul, had hacked the feed and uploaded the entire incident to a shared drive. 5 people brought laptops to the meeting. 5. The second the footage began rolling, there was no going back. There she was, my wife, calmly jogging, earbuds in. The cart screeched to a halt. The man jumped out, yelling. She paused, pulled an earbud out. He pointed a gun. Gasps rippled through the room. Then she disarmed him, fast, efficient, non-lethal, textbook control. He never stood a chance. When the video ended, there was silence, not from fear but from clarity. Karen's narrative didn't just unravel, it exploded. Someone in the back muttered she should be running the HOA. Karen slammed her clipboard on the podium like a toddler throwing a toy. That footage is unauthorized. It does not represent the full context. What context? Someone shouted. The part where your peacekeeper pointed a gun at a veteran taking a jog? Karen tried to retake control, but the tide had turned. The illusion of authority had cracked, and the truth was streaming in through the fissures. By the next morning, retaliation began. We got an envelope, no return address, just HOA letterhead and an ominous stamp that said, urgent. Inside, a list of violations. Excessive aggression, intimidating presence, failure to display neighborhood ID, and my personal favorite, hostile energy during recreational activity. I stared at the paper. She just made jogging a war crime. The fines totaled $1,470.00. My wife didn't flinch. She flipped the paper over, grabbed a pen, and calmly jotted down a list of dates and names. Then she said, she just escalated to the wrong level. Over the next 48 hours, we received 4 more letters, each one more ridiculous than the last. The violations piled up like junk mail from a grudge-pounded printer. It wasn't about order anymore. It was about control. Karen's fantasy of running a neighborhood like a military base was clashing with the reality that she'd picked a fight with someone who could actually dismantle one. See, Karen didn't know the difference between authority and power. She thought her bylaws trumped federal clearance. She thought clipboards beat combat boots. She thought fines could scare someone who once faced mortar fire with a broken comms unit and a penknife. She was wrong. My wife didn't respond with fists. She didn't respond with fury. She responded with something far more dangerous. A plan. She pulled out a folder, labeled it Operations, and started making calls. Not to lawyers, not yet, but to neighbors, to the city, to a few friends in surprisingly quiet government departments. She didn't pack explosives, I said, watching her work. He packed highlighters. And with that, the battlefield shifted, from paranoia to paperwork, from golf carts to governance. And Karen? She had no idea she was about to lose the only war she ever tried to start. The next move in Karen's fantasy war came in the form of a thick envelope stamped confidential. Inside was a restraining order, filed against my wife, accusing her of militant behavior, psychological intimidation, and community destabilization through covert presence. Yes, those exact words. Karen had apparently scrawled through a thesaurus, sprinkled in a few legal terms, and hit print. The document read like fan fiction for people who thought clipboards were tactical gear. One page claimed my wife moved like a shadow and intimidated with her silence. Another said her recreational aura induced fear. I've seen less dramatic language in spy thrillers. It took the judge about 3 minutes to throw it out. After glancing through the packet and confirming the identity of the accused, he looked over the bench and said, "Ma'am, this isn't a restraining order. This is a creative writing sample. Case dismissed." Motion denied. Karen left the courthouse muttering about conspiracies and unlawful joggers. That's when my wife kicked it into high gear. She didn't rage. She didn't rant. She opened her laptop and started digging. Public records, city archives, tax filings, HOA budget reports so poorly redacted you could practically see the fraud jumping off the page. And there it was, a landscaping company called Verdant Horizon, LLC. According to HOA expenses, they'd been paid nearly $180,000, 0 cents over the last 3 years for beautification projects. But a little clicking around revealed Verdant Horizon didn't exist. Not in any state business registry, not in any local contractor logs. The address listed was a P.O. box. The name on the business? The cousin of Captain Clipboard. They weren't planting flowers. They were fertilizing fraud. Over and over, checks were written out for fountains that were never installed, repaved sidewalks that still had 1997 cracks, and community gardens that turned out to be a single potted plant behind the clubhouse dumpster. My wife cross-referenced all of it with footage from our security cameras, time-stamped video proof that no work was done on the days claimed. She printed it all, highlighted it, labeled it like it was a field report on insurgent activity. Then she placed it into a folder marked Initiate. She contacted an auditor, not just any auditor, a federal compliance investigator. It took one phone call, one emailed folder, and less than 2 days for the wheels to turn. By the end of the week, a formal request for HOA financial records was sent from a government email address with a .gov domain that probably gave Karen a full-body shiver. Her response? Lock down the clubhouse. Literally, she had a padlock installed on the front door, moved all board activity off-site, and posted a laminated sign that read, "Temporary closure, Community Harmony Initiative underway." One of her patrol guys, possibly promoted from clipboard holder to chief leaf blower, stood guard out front. In his hand, a battery-powered blower, positioned like a flamethrower from a budget sci-fi flick. Karen had turned the clubhouse into a bunker and the neighborhood into a satire. That's when my wife launched Operation Curb Appeal. No, really, that's what she called it. It started with flyers, not angry ones, informational, clean, sharp, factual. They listed the fake expenses, the illegal bylaw amendments, the shell company payments, no names, just numbers. Just truth. Taped to mailboxes, tucked under welcome mats, clipped to neighborhood notice boards. Then came the signs. Smile, you're being fined for blinking. Gotcha, helping oligarchs abuse. One had a cartoon of Karen's face photoshopped onto a gavel with the phrase, "Obey or pay." They started popping up like mushrooms after a summer rain. First 3, then 12, then half the street. One guy hung his from a drone and let it hover during garbage day. Karen tried to retaliate. She sent out cease and desist letters, threats of additional fines, warnings about unsanctioned signage. No one cared, because the narrative had shifted. Her spell was broken. Her clipboard was just a board now, and no one was buying the act. People started talking, openly. Neighbors who once tiptoed their opinions now shared HOA horror stories over sidewalk chats and coffee runs. One couple was fined for a wind chime that sounded aggressively whimsical. Another family was cited for disorderly chalk drawings done by their 5-year-old. The fear evaporated, and in its place came momentum. The city council caught wind. A special hearing was called, a full investigation into the HOA's legality and financial conduct was added to the public record. Karen was officially under review. And when the notice was delivered, when that crisp white envelope was handed to her at her mailbox in front of 2 very nosy neighbors, she froze. The same way she had when that federal cease and desist landed on her porch. Only this time, it wasn't just one woman fighting back. It was the whole neighborhood. And the gavel? It was coming. The chairs at City Hall weren't fancy, but that didn't stop them from filling fast. People from our street, the next block over, even a few quiet types who hadn't spoken up in years now sat shoulder to shoulder, like it was the HOA Super Bowl. The air buzzed with a kind of electric anticipation, the kind you feel before a verdict drops. Karen arrived fashionably late, of course. She carried a binder so thick it looked like it was prepped for the Library of Congress. Tabs, dividers, even color-coded sticky notes. Her face was drawn tight with stress, but glazed in just enough makeup to pretend confidence. Behind her, a man in khakis holding a clipboard and a Bluetooth earpiece that hadn't worked since 2014. Then came my wife. No entourage, no props, just jeans, boots, and a manila folder tucked under her arm like it wasn't about to detonate a reputation. One brought paperwork, the other brought proof. Karen marched to the podium, opened her binder, and began reading a speech she clearly practiced in front of a mirror. Words like slander, community risk, and neighborhood integrity spilled out like overcooked pasta. Her voice shook just enough to seem fragile. Her eyes darted to the press table, waiting for validation. She pointed fingers, talked about militant intimidation, said my wife was a threat to order. Then my wife stepped forward. No notes, no theatrics, just facts. "I'm here as a resident," she said calmly. "But for the record, I also serve in a Tier 1 U.S. Army Special Mission Unit. I'm currently on classified reserve status with prior roles in operational planning and counterintelligence. I've spent the last decade building peace abroad, and apparently now I'm called to do it in cul-de-sacs." You could hear the oxygen leave the room. Karen's jaw did something I've only seen in cartoons. Dropped, then twisted sideways like a glitching emoji. One of the council members, a gray-haired man with army pins on his lapel, straightened up in his seat. "I thought I recognized you," he said. "Welcome home, ma'am." And just like that, the script flipped. Karen's binder, once her shield, looked more like a prop from a high school mock trial. My wife's folder contained itemized documentation of HOA fund misuse, shell companies, and a forged bylaw passed without quorum. She didn't accuse, she presented. Clean, precise, irrefutable. It was like watching a courtroom drama, but this one didn't end with gavel slams. It ended with red faces and frozen budgets. Because the next morning, the board suspended all HOA operations. Dues were paused, fine enforcement was halted, a public audit was scheduled, residents were advised by city officials to stop submitting payments. Karen didn't speak to the press that day. She just disappeared behind her tinted car windows. But if you thought that was the end of it, oh buddy, you haven't seen the golf cart chase. 3 days later, Karen caught wind that my wife was hand-delivering audit packets door to door. She'd printed a stack, clipped them in folders, and started handing them out like neighborhood truth grenades. Apparently, this triggered Karen's final boss form. She dispatched Captain Clipboard, who hopped into one of the black HSD golf carts like he was on a mission from the Department of Dumb. He hit the sidewalk doing 8 miles per hour, gripping the steering wheel like it owed him money. My wife, ever calm, picked up her pace just slightly. He called out, "Stop, that's unauthorized material," and she didn't flinch. He swerved to cut her off and didn't notice the slightly uneven edge of the sidewalk by the neighbor's honeysuckle. One back tire lifted, then the front. Then the whole cart rolled like a stunt scene from a budget action movie and landed in the bushes with a crunch and a puff of pollen. My wife walked over, retrieved her tote bag from the footwell, and dropped a granola bar on his chest. "In case you're in there a while," she said flatly. The video, of course someone filmed it, hit the local Facebook group within the hour. The caption, "Paul Blart, HOA cop, meets the paperwork avenger." By the end of the week, the HOA officially disbanded. The board members either resigned or ghosted. Karen didn't show up to the next council session. A compliance notice was posted on the Clubhouse. Everything shut down until further notice. For a moment, the neighborhood felt like it exhaled, but Karen wasn't done. Not yet. She came back like a sitcom villain that didn't know she'd already been written out of the show. Clutching a leather-bound folder labeled Personal Legal Defense, Karen returned not with humility, not with reflection, but with a civil complaint so packed with delusion it should have come with a warning label. The documents she filed were thick, at least 1.5 inches of printer paper, single-spaced, covered in bolded phrases like emotional harassment, neighborhood sabotage, and psyops intimidation. She even cited something called the Residential Fairness Doctrine, which doesn't exist outside Reddit threads and conspiracy boards. Irony, her folder was thicker than her case. She accused my wife of weaponizing body language and deploying psychological dominance techniques during neighborhood recreation hours. I'm not kidding. She even submitted a screenshot of a neighborhood flyer with my wife's picture circled in red and labeled high-risk civilian influence. The county clerk called it the most creative legal fiction of the year, and still the hearing was scheduled. And yes, Karen represented herself. The courtroom was modest. But the moment Karen walked in with a rolling suitcase of papers and a 3-ring binder decorated in printed clip art of gavels and HOA logos, it became a theater. She wore a suit 2 sizes too big, heels that clicked like a Morse code warning, and an expression that said she'd been rehearsing this moment in the mirror for weeks. She began by addressing the judge as Your Civic Highness. Strike line. Then she launched into a rambling, 11-minute opening statement filled with references to deep HOA state suppression, resident-led insurgency, and unregistered neighborhood militia. She called my wife a decorated disruptor and claimed the local bake sale was infiltrated by biased scone placement. Strike 2. Then, with full seriousness, she introduced her visual evidence, a grainy slideshow made in PowerPoint featuring Comic Sans captions and one particularly bad Photoshop of my wife standing next to a tank. Strike 3, game over. The judge leaned forward, removed his glasses, and said, "Ms. Brewster, did you ever, at any point, have legal authority to issue citations, detain residents, or enforce laws in this neighborhood?" Karen stammered, said something about community empowerment roles. The judge raised a hand, yes or no. Silence. Then I was advised by a podcast, and that was it. No closing argument needed. The judge issued a ruling so swift it felt like a mercy. Karen's case was dismissed with prejudice, meaning she couldn't file it again. She was fined for wasting court resources and ordered to pay restitution for filing false claims. Most significantly, she was legally barred from holding any residential governance position for a minimum of 10 years. The gavel came down with a finality that didn't just end a case, it ended a reign. Back home, something shifted. Lawn chairs came out again, sidewalk chalk reappeared, porch lights stayed on past 9. At the next HOA meeting, now chaired by Tom, a retired postal worker with a zero-tolerance policy for nonsense, the first new rule was announced. Rule 1, don't be a jerk. That got a standing ovation. My wife returned to her usual routine. Quiet jogs, cup of green tea, checking the porch camera more out of habit than concern. She didn't gloat, she didn't rub it in. Her victory was silent, the kind earned, not flaunted. But someone noticed. 2 weeks later, a manila envelope arrived in the mail, no return address, just a Department of Defense seal and a clearance code I'd never seen before. Inside, an official commendation for exceptional conduct and defense of civil order under constitutional authority. No medal, no press, just a quiet thank you from the kind of people who know what it means when someone stands up, not with noise, but with calm. No parade, just peace. She tucked the certificate into the same secure drawer where she keeps her old field photos. Then she went back to trimming the herb garden. And we thought that was the end. Until the SUV arrived. It pulled up one evening during a neighborhood cookout, clean and official, without saying a word. A man in a navy suit stepped out, haircut military precise, and handed my wife a sealed envelope. They didn't exchange words, just a look. She opened it, read it, folded it, then turned to me and said, "Transport's ready at dawn. I'll be briefed en route." I nodded. She packed light that night, just a duffel bag, a notebook, and a pair of boots that hadn't seen sunlight in months. She left a note on my desk. No signature, just 10 words. Karen was the warm-up. This is the mission. At sunrise, I watched her disappear down the street, SUV rolling quiet and steady. She didn't look back. I didn't expect her to do that. And honestly, I was just proud to know her. If there's one thing we learned from this suburban saga, it's this. Don't shout. Karen built her power on volume and fear, but real strength isn't loud. It's steady, it's strategic, and it always keeps receipts. My wife never raised her voice. She raised evidence. While Karen passed out citations like candy, we passed out copies, proof, bylaws, and budget breakdowns. And in the end, it wasn't a fist that cracked Karen's control. It was a folder. She built her castle out of clipboards and consequences. But truth? Truth came laminated, time-stamped, and bulletproof. We didn't kick down doors, we opened them. One neighbor, one page at a time. Because paper cuts beat paper crowns. If you're out there dealing with your own Karen, listen closely. First rule, stay calm, document everything. Don't argue on the sidewalk, keep your camera rolling and your emails archived. Screenshots are stronger than sarcasm. Second rule, know the real rules. Most HOA charters are public documents. You have the right to request financial records. If things smell fishy, they probably are. Contact your local housing department or city council. Most abuse survives because no one reports it properly. Third rule, build coalitions. Talk to your neighbors. Chances are, if Karen's micromanaged your trash bins, she's harassed someone else too. A single voice can be dismissed. A dozen voices become a hearing. Because clipboard warriors fall when truth gets laminated. When the HOA dust settled, something strange happened. People started being neighbors again. No more paranoia, no more patrol carts, just folks helping each other carry groceries or walking their dogs without wondering if someone was tracking leash length with a ruler. It turned out what makes a community isn't a book of rules, it's people. People who wave first, people who drop off cookies, people who mow someone's lawn without sending a Venmo request after. The best part? Everyone learned it didn't take a hero in camouflage to make that happen, just someone willing to stand up, not with anger, but with action. Because at the end of the day, a real neighbor helps with trash cans, not citations. If this story hit a little too close to home, good. It means you know how high the stakes can get when petty power meets unchecked ego. So here's what you can do right now. Drop your own HOA horror story in the comments. You might inspire someone else to speak up, or we might even feature your saga in a future episode. Subscribe to the channel if you want more justice-fueled, drama-drenched suburban tales. There's always another Karen, always another clipboard, and always another neighbor who thought they were just moving in, not signing up for a civil war in cul-de-sacs. Like this video if you've ever been fined for wind chimes, birthday balloons, or unauthorized holiday cheer. Because this wasn't just a story about a soldier and a tyrant. It was a story about what happens when someone refuses to let fear win.